Hello and welcome to the Ellenmade Book Club and my February wrap-up. I listened to 4 audiobooks in the month of February and I only read 1 physical book, which I have since had to return to the library, so I don't have a lot of books to hold up and show you and hold on to in this video. And I also had a few prompts from my TBR jar, but I have been doing a bit of mood reading and that's been really nice. So I haven't read all of the books for all of the prompts, but the first book I finished this month was ADHD for Smartass Women by Tracy Otsuka, and this was a bit of an impulse listen. I listened to it on audiobook, but I've had it on my want to read list for a while, and I did enjoy some aspects of it, but I also have some mixed feelings about it. It is a nonfiction book, first of all, and it is in a kind of self-helpy kind of format, I guess. There are a lot of real life examples, which is very good. It's also sort of written with an ADHD listener or reader in mind, and she's very clear on if there's a chapter that doesn't interest you, just skip to another one. It's very accessible and engaging and fast-paced in that way. I also appreciated that there is an attitude of there's no right and wrong and there's no judgment on anything. She talks about things like medication and how that can be great for someone and not as great for someone else, and there's no right or wrong. And I also think that there are a lot of relatable examples, and so in that way it can be comforting if you are a woman and you suspect that you might have ADHD and this is kind of the first time you're coming into contact with anything about ADHD for women, because it does have a lot of information. But at the same time, for me, this wasn't the first thing I've ever read about ADHD, and so I didn't really find it very revolutionary or it wasn't a lot of wow experience for me. And I don't have an ADHD diagnosis, and I don't know that I would be diagnosed with ADHD if I did have an assessment, but I do relate to a lot of the experiences, I guess, or symptoms, or how you would like to call it. There are things that I struggle with, or just how I sort of function that is very similar to someone, especially women with ADHD. So yeah, I could relate to a lot of things, and at the same time, I didn't really find a lot of helpful advice in this book. So for instance, at the start of the book, the author mentions that there are different kinds of ADHD, but that is sort of forgotten through the rest of the book, because I feel she mostly focuses on the kind of ADHD that she has. And then there were things that were presented as solutions or as tips and tricks on how to overcome things, but I didn't really find those very helpful because it felt the title is ADHD for Smartass Women, and so if I am a smart-ass woman and I have some intelligence, I still know these things. If you tell me are you struggling with your sleep schedule? Make sure to have a good sleep routine. It's oh really? Great advice. Or do you struggle with your finances? Make sure to have your finances in check. That's not a solution, and it's not that simple in the book. She does break it down into different things that you can do. But it still feels those things wouldn't really work necessarily for someone with ADHD. And there were also a lot of examples of I've done this thing and it worked great for me, and all of these other women who also have ADHD, they tried it and they also said it worked great for them. And so that can be very empowering and helpful, and you can feel well, if they can do it, so can I. That can be great, but it can also feel everybody else, even the other women with ADHD, managed to do this thing and I still can't, so I have to be incredibly bad and a big failure. And I don't think that that's helpful. I think there are things in this book that can be helpful, and things about making things into more of a game, or having just shifting your attitude about certain things that feel big and overwhelming and boring, and trying to break those down into smaller steps that you can, get little wins along the way and things like that. But overall, I felt the solutions were a bit obvious, and just because you know the right way to do something doesn't mean that it's easy for you to do it. So I don't think this book is bad. I just feel I've found more actionable advice elsewhere. Maybe I'm not the target audience for this book, but those are my thoughts on it. The next book I finished was Red Clay by Charles B. Fancher, and this is historical fiction set during the very end of the American Civil War, so right as slavery is coming to an end. So at the start of the book, we're in the 1940s, and there is an old, frail white woman called Adelaide Parker who shows up to the family of Felix Parker, who has just passed away. And so Adelaide Parker is talking to Felix's children or grandchildren? Children, I think. So she shows up and introduces herself, and she says that a long time ago, my family used to own yours, which is a very intense way to start this story. And the story is based on the author's own family history. So it is about his great-grandfather, I think. There's an author's note at the end. It is a work of fiction, but it is based on true events, or like a true person. So then we go back to when Felix, who has just passed away in the 1940s, we go back to when he was a little boy, when he was about like 8 or 10, I think, at the start of the book. So we follow Felix and his parents, and we also follow the white family who own the plantation and are keeping all of these enslaved people working for them. So I would say there's a mix of very dramatic events and sort of historical events, and also the like day-to-day on the plantation and their work and their relationships and all of the, you know, intrigue between people. And then as the years go on, the Civil War comes to an end, and, you know, the effects of that on people. I thought this was a very informative and educational read for me, like about that historical period. And it was also a very enjoyable read in terms of the writing and like the storytelling and the structure of everything. I really enjoyed this as a story. It was like also obviously difficult and heartbreaking and horrible at times, like because of the subject matter of slavery and how people are treated and the Klan and things like that, that were horrific. But the book itself is very well written and the story is very well told. The audiobook is narrated by Dion Graham, who I recognize from The Wager by David Grann, and he was just a perfect narrator for this book. He's kind of an intense narrator, and I usually prefer narrations to be a bit more neutral, but he does a really good job, and he just has a great voice and sort of performance style that matched very well with this book. And so yeah, I think that was a very good choice. All of the characters felt very realistic and believable to me. Some of them are more likable than others, but I also felt like they were very like, they had depth to them. Even the ones that were horrible still had nuance. It wasn't just like this is an evil person and this is a good person and everything they do is either evil or good. There was nuance and yeah, a very realistic portrayal, I feel like. And there was also a lot of different emotions reading this. There was, you know, hardship and sorrow and anger, but there's also like friendship and love and family and community and hopes and dreams, and just like it was a very wide range of emotions and experiences in this book. And yeah, I thought it was very well done and highly recommend it. Moving on to Bunny by Mona Awad. This is a very different vibe. My reading is a little bit all over the place, but that's how I like it. So here we are. I've been wanting to read Bunny for years, and I'm very glad I finally got around to doing it. I thought it was a very enjoyable experience and a lot of fun, and especially compared to some of the heavier reads that I have been reading. And this is not necessarily like positive and upbeat, but it's also like funny and just a wild ride. And yeah, it's a fun time. This follows a girl called Samantha who is at a college doing some kind of writing program thing, and she is in this workshop with 4 other girls who are very like cliquey, and they call each other Bunny, and they're all over each other all the time, and like, I love you so much, Bunny, I love you more, Bunny, all of the time. And so and Samantha is not like that. She has a friend called Ava who's a bit more punk rock of a person. Samantha and her friend Ava are looking at this clique of bunnies and judging them and hating them and thinking that they are ridiculous and incredibly annoying, which they kind of are. And then things start to shift and things get very weird and very dark and very brutal. And it's just, yeah, it's just a fun time. And I don't think I'm going to say much more about the plot. I really enjoyed the writing style and the tone of voice in this book and like the satirical kind of humor and descriptions of things and like, yeah, the little like things that they say. I thought it was confusing and mysterious and creepy and funny and dark and twisty and all of the good things. It felt to me like a mix of The Secret History by Donna Tartt, Legally Blonde / Mean Girls, Donnie Darko, and Alice in Wonderland. Somewhere around there. I loved it. Highly recommend. What else did I read? Next up, I listened to And Then There Were None by Agatha Christie. And this was my second ever Agatha Christie. I read The Murder of Roger Ackroyd last year. And I read that one in a Swedish translation from the 60s. And so that wasn't the best experience. This time I listened to an audiobook narrated by Hugh Fraser in English, and that was a much better experience. I still wasn't blown away by the story, but I also think it's like, I don't think I can judge these books the same way I judge other books. Like Agatha Christie's books are like a separate thing from other kinds of literature in my mind. And so I don't know if that's for me. Like I enjoyed it. I don't think it was bad in any way. I'm not sure it's for me, or like if I enjoy that thing that much. I did think it was like entertaining enough to listen to, but I also didn't really care that much, and I wasn't like super invested in solving the mystery. I was just kind of listening to it as a story, which is fine. And sometimes that's exactly what you want. And I think in this one, there were just so many characters. I didn't have a very clear picture of who was who, and so it was just too much for me to keep track of. I didn't even bother trying to solve any kind of mystery because there were just too many moving parts for me. It was fine, but it was nothing like mind-blowing or, super fantastic for me. I'm still glad I read it because I feel like this is one of those sort of influential books that other newer books take inspiration from, and so yeah, I'm glad I read it. So that's everything I finished in February. I'm currently listening to The Chain by Chimene Suleyman, and I'm almost at the end of that. I think I have like an hour left to listen to. So far, I think it's great. I really like her narration of it as well. She is a like spoken word poet, and so I feel like her writing is reflecting that, and her way of narrating the book is also like sort of in that style. Not all the time, but there are sections of the audiobook which is very like impactful just in the way that she narrates it. She reminds me a bit of Natalie Haynes' voice and like style of delivery. It is about her experience with a man who has been very abusive of very many women, and these women sort of link up and create this chain. And she's also talking about like the chain of women through history and all of that. This guy is an incredibly rotten person and has done horrible things to a lot of women, and she is talking about her experience and the experiences of other women that she's talked to, and the experience of that, of talking to the other women and of talking to like his friends and people who didn't speak up when they probably should have. And yeah, just ways that society enables that kind of behavior. And yeah, I think it's a great memoir, and it just covers so many aspects of this phenomenon, I guess, of men treating women horribly and getting away with it over and over and over and over and over and over and over again. So far, highly recommend. Like I said, I'm not completely finished with it, but it would have to be something quite extreme at the end of this book for me to not recommend it. A very powerful and sort of raw memoir. She just doesn't hold back, and she doesn't hide details of things. It's just all there, and yeah, I think it's very well done and very well told. I'm also still reading Disability Visibility, edited by Alice Wong. This is an anthology by a lot of different people with different kinds of disability, and I'm about a quarter of the way through so far, but I think that this is an incredible book that everyone should read. There are a lot of sections that are very difficult to read and like heartbreaking and just mind-boggling, like the things that people have to deal with, and it's not necessarily because of their disability itself. It's more like because of how they are treated by other people and by systematic things that are just not adapted to work for everyone. I think this is a book that everyone should read and that everyone could read, because the chapters are very short, or like the different entries, or what you call them. I've just been reading 1 or 2 chapters every morning with my coffee, and yeah, I think it's great. And it is a difficult read at parts, and so I think that taking it little by little works for me, and so I'm gonna keep doing that throughout the month of March. And yeah, highly recommend giving this a try. And then I was also supposed to read Olga Dies Dreaming in February by Xochitl Gonzales, and I am on page 10. It's just been one of those months where it's been a lot more focus on audiobooks. That's been what I have had the mental capacity for, and what has just worked with my life or whatever. So yeah, that's how it played out, and it feels like a good month still, because I've just been reading what I have been feeling like reading, and that's been really nice. In terms of my reading challenges that I'm doing, I have crossed off a few different prompts. ADHD for Smartass Women by Tracy Otsuka, I've put on the prompt empowering on my own diversity book bingo, because even though I didn't find it super helpful, I just found the attitude and the general message to be empowering, and so that's why I think it works for that prompt, and that also gives me a point for neurodivergence. Red Clay by Charles B. Fancher, I put on 2025 release on my diversity book bingo, and it also counts for minority in North America. Bunny by Mona Awad counts for the animals prompt on the buzzword title challenge by Kayla at Books and Lala. I'm not using it on the cover challenge because I don't want to double up on like within the buzzword challenges. I'm fine to use one book for different prompts for the different challenges, but I don't want to double up within one challenge. And to me, both the cover and title challenges on the buzzword thing, those are like one and the same. So I'm only using it for the title prompt, if that's of any importance to you. It was also one of my 25 books to read in 2025, which was the prompt that I picked it for. So yeah, that crosses off my first book on that list for this year. Disability Visibility is the book that I'm reading for the prompt nonfiction on my diversity book bingo, but I'm not finished with that yet. So I'm going to put that on there when I'm done. The Chain by Chimene Suleyman, I'm also using, I think, on my diversity book bingo, either for feminist or memoir. It depends on what other book I will be reading. I have a few options, which I think I'm going to talk about in an upcoming video. And then There Were None by Agatha Christie, I'm using for the Classic 6 challenge by Sui at Sui's Book Banter, and the challenge is to read 6 classics during the year. And so yeah, I've read my first one. So that's how I'm doing with that, and I think that's the end of this wrap up. I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you're having a fantastic day, and I will see you in the next one. Bye. So, okay. Should I just start over? I don't know what I'm doing, really.